It's a real pleasure, and to introduce Eliseo. We first met in 1965 in California, at the beginning of the farmer movement. And from the very beginning, he had the spark. We were talking earlier about one of the people we learned organizing from, Fred Ross. We talked about looking for people with bright eyes, because they're the ones that have the potential. They're the ones that will make the future. And we were just talking down there that this is a room full of bright eyes here. And we worked together in that movement from 1965 to 1978. We served together on the executive board of the Farmers Union for almost 8 years. After which Eliseo left to, he's going to tell more about his story, so I don't want to steal the story. Left to begin to work with other unions, communications workers, organizing in Texas. For those of you from Texas, ask him to tell you about organizing in Rio Grande Valley in 1966 and dealing with Lorinchis, the Texas Rangers, and some of the melon workers and all the stuff that went on down there at that time. And then joined the Service Employees Union in California, and eventually rose to be an executive vice president of the Service Employees Union, and is now the National Secretary Treasurer of what's become the largest union in the United States with about 2.2 million members. So he has had quite a journey. And I'll let him tell you about that journey, and just say that es un gran gusto de presentar mi colega, mi compañero de lucha y mi buen amigo Eliseo Medina.
I actually have a little different story than Marshall about that clown. Because it began in, at least, I think we all invented our own stories.
Sure.
You know, when I talk to people, I said, well, have you guys ever been on the beach? And yeah. I said, well, do you ever notice how there's all these big waves that come in? Well, they all start little ripples way out at sea, and as they come closer and closer to shore, they start growing bigger until they are so powerful that nothing can stop them. Now, movement is like that. It's that little bit, and then they gather speed, and they gather speed until they become an unstoppable force. And it's sort of like that. You start slow, you keep going and on until, Marshall said, then you have that strength, sense of unity, purpose. And then people sort of got it. But anyway, let me just tell you, I appreciate Marshall having invited me to come and visit with you, especially when I read your bios. And I noticed 3 things when I read your bios. First is that, Jesus, what a bunch of overachievers. Just amazing. When I read everything that you guys have done and are thinking of doing, it's just amazing, and it's an honor for me to be here with you and share some information. The second thing that I noticed is that in different ways, the way you expressed it, it just wasn't about you. It was about your community. It was about your families. It was about your country. And I really appreciated that there seemed to be a sense, a mission among all of you. And then the third thing that I noticed is that not a one of you studied to be a union organizer. So I'm glad I came and got you before you actually declare. And then Marshall said, our union, just so that you know who we are, we look like America. We are a union of 2.2 million
people from throughout the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. We speak over 100 languages in our union. We look like America. We are professionals, physicians, engineers, planners, architects, engineers. We are blue-collar workers. We're janitors. We're factory workers. We're highway workers. We're technicians. We work in hospitals. We work in office buildings. We work in homes. We take care of the elderly at their homes. We're Latino. We're Asian Pacific Islanders. We're African Americans. We're Caucasians. We are, in fact, a microcosm of America, both in terms of who we are, but also who we serve. And so because of that, our union particularly is very much involved in what's happening in this country. And so how I got there, Marshall told me I should tell my stories, you know, and I also saw myself, by the way, in you. You know, I was born in Mexico, in the state of Zacatecas. Well, I know at least two of you have parents from Zacatecas. There's one, and I know there's somebody. There's the other, because I read your bios. And Zacatecas, for the rest of you that don't know about it, it's a very poor state in Mexico. Arid climate. And I'm from a little town called Huanusco. And my father had a little farm. And because it's very poor, there was no irrigation. And the only time that in our little farm got water is when it rained. Then you got a decent crop. And if it didn't rain, it didn't get very much. And so there was never enough produced at the farm to support the family. So my father, way before I was even born, used to come to the United States to work. He first came as a bracero, a guest worker. And then when that program ended, he came as an undocumented worker. And he would come and stay in the United States for 2 years or so, and then go back home and visit us for a month or 2 months, and then come back. So we basically grew up without a father because he had to be here in order to work. And I remember when people used to come to Huanusco from El Norte, and they seemed like they had lots of money. They were wearing nice clothes. And they used to tell us what a rich country this was. That you came here and, you know, you thought that the streets were made of gold and all you needed was a broom and a dustpan to pick it all up, because this was a place where you got rich. And so we all wanted to come to the United States. So finally my father and my mother decided we were going to come to the United States. So we sold our skinny cows and our chickens and everything else, and we packed up and we're going to go north. So we came to Tijuana, which is on the border with the United States, and my father found us a place to stay in a vecindad, we built an apartment complex. And then he crossed the border to come back to the United States to work, while my mother went to put in la solicitud, you know, the papers so that we'd immigrate. And every day my mother would go looking for la cita, the appointment, so that we'd get our papers. And she did that daily for every business day for 2 years, until they finally decided that we were going to get our immigration papers and come to the United States. So my father then crossed the pond. We came to the United States as a family. And we landed in a little town called Delano. Those of you from California probably know where Delano is, and if you don't know, it's just north of Bakersfield. If you go on the freeway, you better not blink, otherwise you miss it. It was very small. When we got to Delano, my mother and my father and my older sister, my 2 older sisters, went to work in the fields picking grapes. And the 3 younger kids, myself included, they went to school. And when I went to school in the lingo, there was no such thing as bilingual education. And of course, I didn't speak any English. And the teacher, of course, spoke no Spanish, even though the school was 99% Mexicans. So for a year, I sat there in class doodling because the teacher couldn't communicate with me, and I couldn't communicate with the teacher. And once in a while, my fellow students would tell me what was going on. In the first year, I had no clue what was going on, but English sort of like began to stick in my head. So by my second year, I learned English and I was able to communicate and so forth. But there was this message in school that, what am I going to go to school for? You're just going to be a farm worker. You should go to wood shop. Don't think about high school. And sure enough, I believed it. So after I graduated from 8th grade, I went to work in the fields with my family. And when I began working, I was 15 years old. I was making 90 cents per hour. And it hasn't changed that much, unfortunately, in the fields. But when you went there, we're picking grapes. The grapevines are about this tall. It's hot. It's really hot. And there was no cold drinking water. They just had a can of water sitting out in the hot sun. It was like drinking soup. And there were toilets in the field, so you wanted to go to the bathroom, you found the grapevine, you hide behind a tree or something. I can't tell you a humiliation of that. My mother and my sisters, having to do that. But there's nothing we could do, because the growers always told us, if you don't like it, quit. There'll be somebody else that can take your place. So, even though we all were angry and we thought it was wrong, we didn't know there was anything you could do. And then when I came to this country, they said, raise your right hand, swear that you're going to obey the laws of the United States, blah, blah, blah. And I thought if we spoke back that we'd get arrested and deported. So I didn't think there was anything you could do, that was the way it was. There was no hope for the future, nothing you could do. Then one day I heard that there was, one day when I went to a place, People's Store, remember that? And there was a newspaper, a little like this, called El Malcriado. How would you translate El Malcriado in English? Spoiled child. Ill-bred, brat, yeah. Something like that. El Malcriado. And what is this? Because ever since I was a kid, I loved reading. If I had nothing to read, I'd read the back of the cereal box. I loved it so much. So Malcriado, so I pick it up and I start reading. Well, there was a story in there about how this thing called the National Farm Workers Association, a guy named Cesar Chavez, had taken this labor contractor before the labor commissioner because he had been cheating workers out of their wages. So they took him before the labor commission and they made him pay these workers back wages. That never happened in the fields. The worker could go and have that happen. And to make even more incredible, this contractor was the biggest contractor in the whole Kern County area. And to make it even more incredible, he was white. Man, I thought, what? This is incredible. So every week after that, I went and I looked for it. Because I wanted to find out more. Here was somebody fighting back and winning. Then we started hearing things about there had been a grape strike called in Coachella Valley, the southern part of California. Filipino workers had walked out on strike. And the word started going out the next, there's going to be a strike in the labor. I kept listening. And then all of a sudden, by the way, I had gotten into a little car accident, broke my leg. And then I was home one day, I was watching I Love Lucy. That was my favorite show. and then my mother and my sister came running and said, we're on strike, estamos en huelga. I said, what? Sí, nos salimos en huelga. I couldn't believe that was going on. And So I got my crutches and I walked down. And there was this march going down the middle, like 500 people. I've never seen a march. I've never seen anything like that. Incredible. Then they said there's going to be a strike meeting. And the strike meeting was on September 16th. Now, most of you know what September 16th is, right? The Mexican Independence Day. Man, we are all revolutionaries on that day. So there's going to be this strike meeting in the local Catholic church. So I go to a strike meeting. I don't know what it was. So I go and I want to see, I'm with that young woman there. I'll go to the meeting, but I want to see what's going on. And I walked into the church hall. It was packed. People were standing around the perimeter. Every seat was taken. And you could feel this energy in the air. You could actually almost taste it. People had this sense that we're not alone. We can do something. And I thought, man, for somebody to do that, this guy Cesar Chavez must be like 8 feet tall. And he must have a voice like James Earl Jones, the voice of God. That's what I thought Cesar Chavez must be like. And so I'm just sitting, waiting to see what's going to happen next. Then this guy gets up, and this is all those people in front of me. So there used to be a movie star called David Niven. It's very debonair with a mustache and all that. I'm not being probably good. Yeah. Anyway, he looked like a movie star. So the guy gets up, and I said, that must be Cesar Chavez because he looks smooth. Now he got up to introduce Cesar Chavez. And so then I said, ooh, Cesar Chavez. Then this little guy gets up. Like 5'4", I think. Very soft-spoken. Oh, man. It just can't be. What happened to the big guy? So I was so disappointed. But then he started to talk. And even though he was very quiet, you know what? He started talking about David. That we each have as human beings. He started talking about we sell our labor, but doesn't mean we have to sell our soul. That we work for wages to support our families. Doesn't give the growers the right to treat us as worth environmental. And the more he talked, the more it made sense to me. The more I thought, we can do this. Because you have 1,000 people and they all agree. And we're no longer alone. All of us can do something. So man, when that meeting was over, the next morning I went and I had a little piggy bank. I broke it open. I counted out $10.50. Went in the next day and joined the union. Paid 3 months dues in advance. And that was how I got into 45 years ago, 46 years ago. And to me, this has been the most life-changing experience. It has been an opportunity that somebody like me would never have had. I mean, where else would you find somebody, an immigrant with an 8th grade education, to have had the opportunities that I've had to contribute, to be able to put my little granito de arena to help make things better for our people. And let me tell you that this is why I think that what you guys are here talking about matters. Because things in this country are well. Things in this country, the richest nation in the world, things are getting worse. If you look at the income inequality in this country, we have more rich people today than any time in our history. More poor people than any time in our history, and the middle class has disappeared. People have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. There are jobs that have no benefits, no future, no respect. And and it makes you wonder, when people have to spend all of their life working, and I work in organizing janitors. You know, a lot of them, and home care workers and others, they have 3 jobs. 3 jobs. Go to work at 6 a.m., get off at 3, go home, cook dinner for the kids, go to your night job from 6 to 11, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, your 3rd job. And when people have to spend all of their life working, when are they going to have time for their families and for their children? To give them the nurturance and the guidance that they need if they're going to grow up to be healthy and happy human beings. You know, and so when you look and you think about all of these social problems that we have, you know, gangs and drugs and all of this kind of stuff, is it any wonder that we have these problems? When parents have to do that, and it's not, it's both parents. And then we see that we also have a situation where the pensions are under attack now. You know, we see that education is going to hell in a handbasket. You know, today in California, which used to have the premier university system in the country, who can afford to go to school anymore? And then we have a broken immigration system where 11 million people have to live in the shadows, even though this is a country of immigrants. Without immigrants, this country would collapse. We make huge contributions to society. But then you see all of the attacks that are being leveled against immigrants. You know, SB 1070 in Arizona and SB 1070 clones everywhere. You know, Republicans trying to repeal the 14th Amendment in order to take away citizenship from kids whose at least one parent is a non-documented status. And then you see, now with this e-verified proposal that's been floated in the Congress that you all probably know about, this is to verify everybody's employment. Everybody. Not just undocumented workers. All of you, Marshall, you're going to be verified too. They're going to check papers in a system that's so faulty that they have about a 20% error rate. All of this, there seems to be this kind of hatred that seems to be acceptable by the Fox News, who claims that they are fair and balanced, but in truth neither. So we have a huge challenges, and this is what we in the labor movement, and I think all of us as a society, need to say, how are we going to deal with this? How do we make sure that this country can be what we all would like it to be? So in the good news, though, there's a huge, huge fight back beginning. I mean, immigrants are leading the way. In 2006, in a 2-day period, 3 million immigrants were marching in 43 states, over 120 cities in this country in 2 days. We have never seen that level of mobilization, and the people that were marching were old and young, men and women of all colors and all races. People are saying, we are not criminals. We are workers. You come here and work. You deserve respect. And then you've just seen what's happening in Wisconsin, where a governor there is trying to take away workers' constitutional right to freedom of association. And then you saw thousands of people turn out at the state capitol. There's a movement being born in this country. There's a movement being born. And that's good. We are trying to reclaim this country again. And I think that's great. And I think that all of us working together, and you guys are the future. You are the future leaders. And future in our country is going to be in your hands and not mine. And if you look at the history of this country, that the different people that continue fighting for what happened when women couldn't have the right to vote, and a group of brave women organized and fought for equal rights. And because they fought, America's never been the same again. It's been a better place for all of us. Then the civil rights movement, you know, African African Americans were not treated as equals. They organized and they fought against the volcanoes and against fire hoses, and people were beaten and killed. Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King Jr., but they fought and they won and they awakened the best of in this country. America's never been the same again. And the farm workers, people were killed there, but they organized and they fought. And I think that they awakened this Chicano Latino movement in this country. And I believe that America will never be the same again. And I think that immigrants are doing the same thing. So it's a great time for all of us who care about this country, who care about human rights, who care about civil rights in this country. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And so let me stop there, because maybe it would be better if we just sort of talked about some of these things. So if you have any comments, questions, I would love to be able to hear your thoughts. Yes?
I have a comment.
Please identify yourself.
Say your name and what's who you're from.
Hello everyone, my name is Ana Betsy Rivera. I come from Miami College, honors college program program. And my question is, I don't know if you're familiar with Colors of the Mountain, the book written by Dutch Chen, which is about the Cultural Revolution in China and how he faced pretty much this responsibility of going with his family to work at the farm, and he couldn't have the opportunity to go to school while other children were having that opportunity. And I really want to know if that relates to you in a sense. I know it relates to you because you had to work at the farm and stuff, but how does it relate to you exactly? Am I explaining well?
Yes. I haven't read the book, but I'm going to get Marshall to, and we'll have a little book conversation. But, clearly, it seems to me is that, if I understood your question correctly, is that people need the opportunity, and particularly education, I think, is the single most important thing that we can do for the next generation. Not only because they learn to do different things, but they get to experiences and possibilities. So for me, like my kids, and I think all of you, by the way, when I read, I saw my kids, what you are doing and the education you're receiving, is exactly what is an immigrant's dream. To have your kids do better than you did, and also be able to contribute to society. So I don't know if I answered your question because I haven't read the book, but it certainly is, to me, is a critically important piece of it.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura Herrera. I too am from Miami College in Belo. I actually have two questions for you. The first question is, I believe last week an article came out in the New York Times and the New York Post called "My Life as an Undocumented Immigrant," and I wanted to see if you had read it and your thoughts on that.
We're talking about the journalist, right?
Yes. Jose Vargas or Juan Vargas.
Burgos, I believe. Yeah. Did everybody read that article?
Yeah.
This was a journalist who was part of a team that won a Pulitzer Prize. He was brought from the Philippines, and he thought that he was coming documented because he got handed off to somebody they said was his uncle. It turned out to be a coyote, and he didn't know that he was like 12. So when he got here, and then he didn't find out he was undocumented until he was 17. And then he wanted to keep it quiet because he was afraid that they would discover him and all that shame. But he went all the way through and went to college and then got jobs with the Washington Post and I think the New York Times as well, and hugely successful journalist. And he finally decided to come out and tell his story because of all this immigration debate. And and it just, to me, when I read that article, I said, two things. One, it shows what immigrants are capable of in this country, about the talents and the skills and the passion that we bring country. But secondly, what a shame it is that people have to hide themselves and live in the shadows of the society. You know, and it spoke to, I think, why this policy that we have is so ludicrous. How do we change it? But it also said to me the incredible courage of this young man. As he in essence threw away a hugely successful career. And for all he knows, he could be arrested and deported. And why should we do that to human beings? You know, and I think that the American people are good people. I think when they see that human face to the problem, I think that they'll respond in a good way, the way they responded to us and the farm workers, because people in this country are very fair-minded people. I think they want to do the right thing. Sometimes they may not know what the right thing is, and sometimes you may need to really push them to see it, but I think that eventually that will be one of those moments that will help us get that much closer to immigration.
And actually, in the beginning of his article, he said that part of what inspired him to write it was 5 students from Miami-Dade College who walked to Washington, D.C. before the last voting of the DREAM Act. So I wanted to see what you thought about that and the DREAM Act, and whether or not, what you think the future of the DREAM Act might be.
You know, the kids walk 1,500 miles. I can imagine walking 1,500 miles, and you go, and you know, walking from Florida. Some of those places are not places that you would feel safe in. Then they walk through Georgia and South Carolina, not what you would call Berkeley. But so the incredible courage of these students to do that is just amazing. And I actually just served on a committee that we were awarding what we call the Freedom from Fear Award. And they were one of the groups that we presented an award at the Netwoods Nation about 2 weeks ago. And I tell you, I love the Dreamers. Every one of them reminds me a lot of you guys. They have valedictorians, they have huge grade point averages. And you know, and I said, some of these kids, eventually, one of them, for all we know, could discover the cure for cancer. They could be this hugely successful attorneys. They could be all kinds of things. Or they could just be great union organizers or plain good human beings. You know, and I think that they're going to be able to drive us also to the point of being successful in immigration reform. They are wonderful.
Oh, Ray is familiar.
Thank you. I don't know what that means.
I'm just surprised.
But as you said, Reyes Ramirez, Houston. What do you feel is the main argument for things like SB 1070? Because I mean, as much as we understand, you know, our position, I think it's also important that we understand the opponent's position.
Well, I think there's the stated position and the unstated position. The stated position, they said, we're a nation of laws. Every nation had a right to protect its borders. People shouldn't be able to just break the law, come into this country, and get protected. And therefore, the best way that we can do it is we have to seal our borders, and the way to do that is also by stopping the magnet of jobs, but making sure that employers don't hire undocumented workers. That's the only way we'll secure and protect our borders. That's what they would say, I think. The unstated reason, quite honestly, I think these people are having a really hard time dealing with the diversity of America. They think that they don't like to see Spanish being spoken. All of a sudden, they start seeing a lot of people that don't look like them, and because they've never dealt with anybody that didn't look like them, they have a hard time figuring out what to do about it. And I think what that is a result of what we're having in this country is not a debate about public policy. we're having a debate about ideology and a debate about power. And in this case, I think that the only way we're going to do it is first, we got to have a real conversation with the American people. But secondly, we also got to organize ourselves so we can be advocates for ourselves. Because that's the only way we're going to get there.
Thank you.
Hi, Silvia Rodriguez. I'm a mentor. I have a few questions. First, I wanted to say one of the people that got the award, Gabby Pacheco from Miami College, they all ended up the walk in Arizona, and I was there, and they met with Sheriff Arpaio, and they changed their message. They said, we're not undocumented, we're human beings, and acknowledging that they could document their own existence. And so I just wanted to say that because that was like an incredible thing. She gave a hug to Arpaio and gave him a piece of coal and said, this is where you come from the earth, and we all come from. So that was just a really touching thing that I wanted to share with everybody and ask you. In this issue of immigration, we're all from such diverse backgrounds. Our experiences as Cuban or Puerto Rican are very different as immigrants or migrants from Mexico. So what advice do you have for some of us that don't experience our family members when they immigrate or emigrate, don't have the same issues as Mexicans coming from the South? And what is your advice as somebody más mayor, con experiencia, to us new leaders of these new movements that are very institutionalized and a different kind of struggle?
Well, let me tell you you're right. For the longest time, we all were from different parts of Latin America. Okay? Yo soy cubano, yo soy puertorriqueño, yo soy mexicano, yo soy salvadoreño, dominicano, etc. And we did have our thing. Now, thank God for the best Latino organizers that I've ever have met. That is changing. Organizers that I've ever met are Governor Brewer in Arizona, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Governor Pete Wilson of California. They have done more to bring us together than anybody else in the history of this country, because they are telling us every Mexican is undocumented, and every Latino is Mexican. Because when they pass 1070, if they're going to go out and check, all they're going to look at your face, what you look like, and your last name. They won't know whether you're Puerto Rican or Mexican or Ecuadorian. You look suspicious. And I think that the best thing to do is that at this point, this is number one, I believe it's a human rights issue, but it's also an issue that is going to touch each and every one of us, regardless of what part of the world we come from. Now, I think that there are some people that are a little bit older that may not have been up for the struggle, but you know what? Our job is, and whatever career you choose in the future, we're all organizers. Because what you've been talking about, the story of us and all of that, is how do you go out and build relationships and organize people to act. And really, I tell you, part of our jobs is to convince everyone that we do have power to be able to become the stewards of our own destiny by choosing to act. And organizers, I always think about organizers as social justice pyromaniacs. Because our job is to go out there and set people's hearts on fire, their minds, so that they can act. In their own interests will make a difference. And I think, that all of us, some of us are more difficult, like me, when initially my mother used to tell me, hijo, métete a la unión, No, si me hacen, me meto, pero si no, no. But then after I got involved with the union, I mean, you know, it's like, God, it's an expression of who we are as a community and as individuals. And don't get me started out there. Yes.
Wait, she had her hand up a long time ago.
Oh.
So she could
Melissa Hernandez from the University of Houston. I think it's a little bit along the lines of what she was saying. What do you hope for more or expect of our generation to accomplish in the next couple of years?
Well, Marshall and I have a baton. Guess who's there waiting to take it over? You guys. You really, I think, when I was a young organizer, I heard a song that was in the labor movement that said, freedom doesn't come like a bird of the wind. Freedom doesn't come like a summer rain, soft summer rain. Freedom is a hard-won thing. You have to fight for it, every day for it, and every generation has to win it again. We are going to do our part to move it, and then you're the next generation that has to take over and continue what we have done in order for us to be able to claim a rightful place in this society. And when I say we, I'm talking about a royal we, not just Latinos, but everyone in this country. You know, this is a country that, while imperfect, really tries to do the right thing. But sometimes it needs a push. And it's all of us. And what I hope that whatever you wind up doing, that you don't forget where you came from, that you don't forget who you are, and that you don't forget that to those that much is given, much is expected. And that you also contribute su granito de arena to make things better for everybody. That's what I expect from all of you, and I know you will because we're reading your bios. Well, your way to doing that. Keep at it. Sometimes it's hard. You know, I know that sometimes making change is not easy. Sometimes it seems like it's the most difficult in the world, you know, and me being a farm worker growing up in the Central Valley of California, the Central Valley is long valley, flat. And sometimes in the struggle, it seems like that. But then you hit a peak, you know, in organizing, and you can see from that peak where you came from, but also where you want to go. And it makes it all worthwhile. And so I hope that you, and I not only hope, I know that 10 years, I'm going to be reading about all of you. And I know that we're going to be way, way better situation than we are today because you guys and many people that you go out and you organize, because you got to go in and infect other people. You got to go and touch them so that they too will realize their potential and will be everything they can be and make our community look good.